Happy November, everyone. Glad you could be here. I was just going through my recipes, trying to find some fun holiday recipes to send you. Um, you'll get the slides from tonight and then the recording and a couple handouts on holiday tips and holiday swaps. And then a few recipes too, but I got to get through my recipe folder and just see what I want to send you. That should come in the next day or two from Christina at Stilly Valley. So we are in class 11. It's November, and we've been going through the Preventing Diabetes book together. We're at the very end, the last chapter, actually, chapter 13. There is an appendix, and there is like a little extra section right before the appendix on some strategies, which we're actually going to talk about next week or next month, some problem-solving strategies. And then I'm also going to bring up some alternative approaches for blood sugar control next month as well. So probably, some interesting things that you may not have heard about in the past. And then we'll also just kind of wrap up the year, what we covered this year. But today we're going to go over chapter 13 and some holiday strategies as well. So feel free to, put things in the chat or the Q&A since I can't see you or hear you. And I will check on that every so often. And if there's anyone new here tonight, my name is Megan. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm also a certified diabetes care and education specialist. And we are going through this book on preventing diabetes. We've been doing it one class per month for the whole year of 2025. And last month we had a recap. So we, checked in on goals and kind of did a recap on food and activity and some of the strategies that hopefully that you're working on so far this year. If anyone changed their goals or tweaked their goals, or if anybody met a goal, go ahead and put that in the chat or the Q&A. I'd love to hear from you. And then we also talked about some fall favorite recipes, talking about tweaking your recipes to be a little healthier, especially with the holidays coming up. We tend to have a lot of calorie dense, high sugar, high salt, high possibly alcohol treats in the mix. And so it's really nice if you can go back to your recipes and maybe just tweak them to be a little healthier. And we'll talk some more about that later today. Oh, Diane says, I finally got back to exercising this week. Amazing. That feels so good, I bet. Yay. Good for you. That's fantastic. I was out raking leaves earlier today for my exercise. Lots of leaves on the ground. Okie dokie. Let's get into chapter 13. And it's 14 steps to help. Technically, the title is Help Your Child, but I've changed this to a loved one because maybe you don't have kids at home, or maybe you have grandkids, and you're concerned about their health, or maybe you have a partner or a friend and you're concerned about diabetes or prediabetes in a loved one. And so these are some tips that, can be supportive for helping them, but also it's good reminders for ourselves for the things that we're trying to change and work on. So it'll be a good just refresher as well. Barbara says, I was able to lower my A1C from 7 to 6.4 without any meds. That is amazing. That doesn't, I know in the like in a numbering system, it doesn't sound like a lot, but actually for an A1C, that is a significant improvement. Going from 7 to 6.4 without any medication is really quite remarkable. So kudos to you, gold star. That's amazing. Linda says, I've bumped up strength exercises over the past few weeks, plus the walking. So good for your muscles, for your bones. And then also we've talked about that uptake of glucose into the muscle. So yeah, that's really, really fantastic. I'm thinking a lot more about my muscles these days too. Just being a middle-aged woman, it gets harder. So we got to stay on top of it. Good job. All righty. So let's get into step number 1 here. addresses weight right off the get-go. And especially if you have a child who's maybe overweight or is in that obese category, sometimes it can be kind of scary and you're not quite sure how to approach it. So definitely do check in with the primary care physician if weight should even be addressed. Sometimes depending on the age and the development of the kiddo, they may just grow into their weight. So, it might not be appropriate for them to actually lose, especially if they have not gained their height yet. And so growing into weight may be more appropriate depending on the situation. And then also even with older adults, thinking about, we're a culture that is so focused on the scale, right? But remember that that muscle mass is more important than the number on the scale. And really, when we're thinking about focus on weight, a lot of times people get overly obsessed with that one metric. But we know that metabolic health can be improved at any weight. And especially if you are starting to do like those strength exercises, you're starting to put on some muscle, some bone, you may see the scale stay the same or even go up with the effort that you're putting in. And that might be really healthful weight because maybe you needed to gain some muscle, right? So, think about the big picture, not just the number on the scale. We really want to be emphasizing, being strong, growing well, especially for our kiddos, having complete development and improving health overall. Step number two, I'm going to just toot my horn a little bit. So, do ask for a referral to a registered dietitian nutritionist if you've not had that before, especially if you're feeling a little lost or if you're feeling like you have different goals happening in the family. Every person has their unique health needs, especially if you are, in a family that has like different chronic conditions, like maybe somebody has diabetes, maybe somebody else has kidney stuff, maybe somebody else has, heart health things going on. Maybe you have a grandkid living with you who's, going through a growth spurt. So there's lots of different, unique health needs within a family or, a group that's eating together, but then also different preferences, right? And so we really do want to get pretty individualized with interventions. And then also dietitians work on, addressing barriers to making changes, helping you to work a little smarter than harder. Hopefully some of the strategies we've talked about this year have given you, some ideas and, getting out of that idea that it's all willpower, but more, your environment and setting up your strategies for success. Um, we can certainly address nutrition myths and then, of course, the accountability for a lot of people. A lot of my patients, especially those who do have diabetes, come back, once a month or once a quarter, depending on their preference for their timing, just to check in and stay on top of things. So if you haven't had that, that might be a nice strategy. And that was step number 2 in the book. Just check the chat really quick. Lorraine says, I'm new to this class on Zoom. I've been to some of your live classes. Oh, fun. Trying to learn how to lower my A1C and miss my balance classes. Oh, yeah. So, Lorraine, you can go back and watch any of the recorded videos. Christina, who will send you an email, you can just reach out to her on how to access those because we've had 10 other classes so far this year. So you might want to, go back and refresh and go back to the beginning, especially if you want to go through the book. That's kind of helpful to just go through it in a linear fashion. But you can jump around too. There are different topics each month. Okay, and let me just check the Q&A really quick. Lyle says, I reduced some snacking during watching sports on TV. Yeah, so it's sports season for sure. And it's kind of a double whammy because you're sitting, plus if we associate the TV with, the snacking thing, we're both like being inactive plus taking in more calories. And sometimes the snacks aren't the healthiest options. So even just, reducing the snacking or kind of delineating or, uncoupling the TV from food can be helpful, or making swaps, making those snacks the things that you're missing. Like maybe you're missing vegetables or you haven't had any beans, like maybe it's like a hummus dip or a veggie bean dip, something like that. So yeah, you can make swaps, or you can just like, make a little bit of a break there. That can be helpful. Good job. Alrighty. So step number 3 in the book talks about when you're making changes to do it as a group, make it a family effort or a group effort, trying to not single one person out. Because if one person has like a different diet or one person has a different plan, that really is not fun for that person. But also, you kind of want the support of the whole family or the whole, friend unit. And you also want to be modeling the behaviors that you're trying to support. So, kids are going to do what you do, not so much what you say. And actually, that goes for, kids of all ages, right? So, we really want to be modeling the healthy behaviors, which really means everybody is on the same page. Okay. Step number 4, we're really trying to avoid using negative language, especially around food and body. We're trying to keep that relationship with food really positive and focusing on, not so much on restriction, but really on the things that are missing, because there's so many things that are missing in our standard American diet. So we really can focus on the things to add and keep it super positive. And naturally, some of those other things will get pushed out, the things that you're not wanting to have as much of, maybe, the ultra processed foods or the things that are not as nutrient dense, or maybe have additives or extra sugar or salt. And if you're naturally, focused on these whole foods, you are going to just by default be having less of the other things, right? So we know that most people are not getting enough fruits, veggies, whole grains, nuts and seeds, healthy fats, especially those omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory and can be helpful for, heart health, brain health, but also blood sugar control because of helping with insulin resistance. And then lean proteins, physical activity, strength and mobility, lots of things to add. And that positivity really does work for all ages, for adults and kids. All right, let me check the chat again. So Nancy says she's working on coloring, crochet, anything to occupy the hands while watching TV. Yeah, that actually is a tip that a lot of my patients have told me has been really helpful, because if you are kind of like a kinesthetic person, like you like to be doing multiple things at once, sometimes that is the snacking thing, right? But if you can busy your hands with knitting or a crossword or whatever it is, and you're kind of doing two things at once, that can be really helpful so that you're not just like boredom eating, right? Or eating because of the location, like out of habit. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Okie dokie. Okay, step number 5, supporting choices and, really empowering towards choices. And this, goes for really the whole family. Everybody should get at least some input, even little kiddos, into what the dinner plan is or the snack plan. Of course, as the parent or the caregiver, you would be providing the options, right? So maybe you have 2, maximum 3 options for a healthy snack, and then you're allowing that choice, right? So it's empowerment, but it's within a structure of providing a healthy choice. And if you're wanting more information about this kind of strategy with kiddos, there is some, you can look up the term division of responsibility. So there's, books and handouts and all kinds of things on this topic. And it really is geared towards like picky eaters. So if you have any picky eaters in your life, that can be helpful. But division of responsibility basically says, as the caregiver or the adult, you are providing the what, so what it is that's on the table, the when, so the structure around like snacks, meals, and the where. So, eating at the table, for example, instead of eating in front of the television. And then the child gets to decide how much and if they're going to eat, what you've provided. And you really don't want to get into a power struggle around that because really you can't force them to eat. And you really don't want the dinner table to be a battleground anyway. You want it to be an enjoyable thing. And sometimes the less focus on the food, the better, actually, especially with picky eaters. If you can talk about your day or play a word game or, have some discussion about something else so there's not so much pressure on the food, that can actually be a strategy for getting picky eaters to actually try some things and follow your lead with modeling because you're trying the broccoli or you're trying the salad or whatever it is, versus you telling them to do it, right? If you're looking for some guidance for kiddos and planning meals, the myplate.gov website has a lot of good resources, and also has portions and, kind of like food group amounts for certain ages. So if you're kind of like, how much does a 5-year-old eat versus how much does a 10 to 12-year-old eat? You can look that up on myplate.gov, and it gives you different activity levels as well. So that can be helpful. And then family style dining is basically where everything goes on the table instead of like pre-portioning or giving, different things to different people. Everything goes on the table and then you pass the food around, and ideally each person, even the little kiddos, would get to portion their own amounts of whatever it is, and they get to choose if they want it on their plate. Now, with this style, ideally you would have at least one winner at every meal, meaning like at least one thing that is a likable thing by everybody, or one thing that each family member will like, and it might be a different thing, right? But as long as you have a winner so that there's always something for, everybody in the family to put on their plate. And then, if they're branching out and trying new things, they might not eat a lot of it, or they might even take just one bite of a new food. Um, but that's actually an opportunity to teach etiquette versus, trying to force something, but more like an approach that is, like a no thank you bite or a nod to the chef, like basically teaching etiquette, like if they were going to somebody else's house for dinner, that they would still put a little something on their plate and try it, even if they don't like it. And that's okay because they're learning new things. And this is good for adults too, because sometimes we get in a rut with what we're eating or things we think that we're not going to like instead of just, continuing to try new things. And then get in the kitchen, have fun, get them started early. We're going to talk about this in just a minute, some more. Okay. And then, especially with kiddos, but even with adults, we want to be supportive and not controlling, and helping, especially kids, to tap into their hunger cues and fullness cues. And this can be learned over time. So if you feel like you're out of touch with your cues, and this is true for a lot of my patients actually, especially in people with diabetes or people who are managing obesity, a lot of times those stress hormones are off, and so we don't get those normal cues like in the morning, for example, to be hungry. But once we get on a schedule with eating, and we've talked about that, in previous months, the eating every 3 to 4 hours, starting with breakfast. Once you get into a routine with that and you're doing that consistently for a couple weeks, typically by a couple weeks in, most people will start getting the normal cues. Sometimes it takes a little longer, especially if there are sleep disturbances going on, because of, the cortisol and the hormones are just ramped up in the morning, so you don't get those normal cues. But this can be learned over time. And if you're feeling like you don't get the fullness cues, remember that it does take some time. That 20 minutes is a real thing where your stretch receptors are happening. We get both It's like baroreceptors, so like stretch, physical, but also chemical receptors and even temperature receptors in our stomach that then send signals to our hypothalamus to tell us that we're full. And we do need some time for those things to kick in. So slowing down, and we're going to talk about that in another slide tonight. If you feel like you have someone, a loved one who is, beyond just picky eating, for example, like avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, ARFID, is like an extreme type of picky eating that typically is associated with autism spectrum disorder, or other neurodivergent situations. And oftentimes it's associated with oral sensitivities like textural or, extreme smell and taste. And so if you feel like something is going on with your kiddo or your grandkiddo, you can certainly get them checked out for a specific eating disorder, or if there's restriction or binging going on, for sure, they should be getting support. But also, I would say with any mental health things like depression, anxiety, sleep disturbances, all of those things can impact food intake. Um, for example, I had a friend who her kiddo was not really growing. He was growing out a lot, not growing up a lot, and needed his adenoids out for sleep apnea when he was like 3 years old. And then all of a sudden, he was growing and sleeping better. And it also changed his dietary intake. So, just be on the lookout for those kind of dysregulated behaviors to see if, professional support may be warranted. And you can certainly ask the PCP about that, or their pediatrician about that. Okay, let me go back to the chat. Let's just check. Yeah. Biggest thing I've noticed is eating slower. It does make a difference when you slow down and when you chew more, when you savor the food. Yeah. A lot of us are very fast eaters. Okay. Let's move on to step number 7. Making activity fun, social. Hopefully you're doing that for yourselves, but also if you have a loved one that, is working on blood sugar control. And there's all kinds of things to do: biking, dancing, swimming, playing sports together, or learning, a new activity together. There are some really fun indoor activities as well, like the Wii Fit, where you're doing different games and you are moving, but you're inside. Or like Just Dance, where you're, following dance moves, and it's got music and you're kind of doing battles with each other. That can be fun. Or even just old school games like charades, and then Heads Up is a newer game. It's really nice to plan some active traditions, walks after dinner or Pictionary after a holiday meal. That was one of my favorites growing up. Or like this little kiddo here, Jenga, even just something, a table game, but you are doing some movement with that versus just sitting in front of the television, right? When we lived in Arizona, we had a tradition of hiking with our friends before Thanksgiving, and I miss that tradition. Uh, these days we're with an older crowd on Thanksgiving morning, but then we hike the next morning with some friends. So sometimes it's, nice to just build that in and make it a tradition. Do you guys have any traditions like that? Any active things that you're doing? Go ahead and put those in the chat, or fun games that you would recommend that have a little bit of activity involved. Okay, step number 8, especially with our younger kiddos, but really for everyone, we want to be modeling good eating and exercise behaviors. Others will learn from your habit. So show them, that good health is important and to be valued. And then remember that for yourself too, who you surround yourself with, really, like your 5 closest friends, they are your biggest influencers. And so you want people who are supporting your goals, who are good role models for you. Um, and, you can do the same for them as well. Okay, step number 9, eat more meals at home. Ideally, they're, not just takeout, right? You're cooking them at home together. And we've talked a lot about this in previous classes. So, planning ahead is half the battle, having a meal plan, having a grocery list, using your tools to make things a little easier, like your slow cookers, or if you need something faster, like your Instant Pot, using multiple equipment at once, like the microwave plus a toaster oven going at the same time. And then we talked about your plan B meals as well. Those like 15-minute go-to meals that you always have the ingredients for. They're quick, they're balanced, they're healthy, and people don't get tired of them. So you can have a handful of those in your repertoire. That would be really helpful. And then especially if you have kiddos or grandkiddos or picky eaters in the family, it's nice to do like deconstructed meals or build your own meals where basically you have lots of options on the table or in the kitchen, and then people get to, assemble their own version of what they're having. So for example, if we do, um, tacos is a great example. So you can do, lots of different toppings and then people assemble their own tacos. You can do the same with salads. We do that with potatoes. So like a baked potato as a base, and then all your veggies and some different protein options and different, sauces or healthy fats or nuts and seeds on the top. Or pizza is a great example, like pizza on a tortilla. So you don't even need like, thick bread. It could just be a really thin tortilla and a little sauce on there, and everybody gets to assemble their own. But those, deconstructed options are really helpful for everybody basically involved in the same meal, but getting to make their own choices. And then I put a couple things on here like this frittata up in the corner because breakfast for dinner is really fast. So that's a nice plan B meal. Or rotisserie chicken dinner ideas. I think I sent you some more recipes of that in the past. Okay. And if you have any 15-minute or deconstructed meals you want to share, go ahead and put those in the chat. Okay. And then step number 10, ideally you would be including the family in the planning, so even ahead of time, and the preparation. And there are lots of age-appropriate tasks that even little kiddos could do, like setting the table, folding napkins, taking drink orders, counting portions of things, helping to measure, reading recipes, even if they're just turning pages, right? If they're not really reading yet. um, Rinsing and washing, like produce, tearing lettuce, um, tossing things in a bowl, or stirring, kneading, mashing. There's so many ways to get the kids involved, and they're much more likely to try things that they have been involved with. And if you can get them involved even earlier in the process, like gardening, planting, picking produce, even if it's just going to the grocery store and picking out, fun fruit or vegetable, um, that they get to choose and then try later. Those are all ideas for, helping them feel empowered, but also getting them outside of their comfort zone and potentially trying some new things. Okay, there's a question in the chat. Have you found a healthier pasta or spaghetti sauce? I actually just straight up make my own spaghetti sauce from tomatoes, and I can send you that recipe. I'll put that in the list of things to send. It's really great. You get to control the salt. There's not added sugar in there. You basically just start with a can of like crushed tomatoes or even just whole tomatoes, and you can blend it, or I have an immersion blender that will kind of break it up. And then a little bit of balsamic vinegar in there is lovely, some herbs, some spices. So I'll send that to you guys so you have that basic spaghetti sauce recipe. And then I would, especially for if you're trying to like, bump up the nutrition or you've got picky eaters in the house, I would think about hiding some vegetables in there as well. Start with your onions and a little olive oil. Saute those down so they're nice and sweet. Maybe add some shredded carrots, even like, zucchini, where you basically take off the outside, like peel it, and then it's just the white part, and you can dice that. And when you saute it, it falls apart. So it's really hidden in there. It's a way to bump up the veggies and make it go a little further without it being like a separate vegetable. So yeah, you can do that with any of your sauces. Think about how you can sneak in some more produce. Some of my patients, I have them make pesto and then put it in little ice cube trays. So it's like in little cubes where they can just throw it into spaghetti sauce, or they can throw it into, a casserole where they're adding a little bit of extra greens into things, or even into a smoothie. That can be a nice little boost. Okay, step number 11. So we really are trying to eliminate or very much limit sugar sweetened beverages. There really is no benefit. I mean, other than taste, right? But taste buds and expectations will change over time. And so those things really have almost no nutritive value other than, just calories. And from a blood sugar sense, like it's liquid, right? It's going to spike blood sugar very, very quickly. But then also we get that insulin release. And so then it drops blood sugar. So it kind of puts us on that roller coaster of wanting more sweet things over the day. So, that is the one thing. If you can make one change, like let's say you're drinking regular soda right now, if you can get off of it and, have some sparkling water if you're going for the fizziness, or, do something more nutritive like milk even, that's going to make a big difference in your blood sugar control, and also just, changes your palate over time. And then we want to make hydration really easy. So, especially for kiddos, starting the day with water or milk, having that as a routine, fluids at every meal because they're sitting down. A lot of kids, especially, don't get the same kind of thirst cues, so they need to be told. And they don't sweat the same way that adults do prepubescence. And so we want to keep them hydrated, especially if they are in sports. That's probably why you've seen, if you've been to like a soccer game or a baseball game, there's a lot of emphasis on hydration for the kids who aren't teenagers yet, because they don't have the same sweating capability. And so they can get overheated pretty quickly. Um, and then having water bottles around, ideally ones that are not plastic. If you can, find a good stainless steel, or like these options here are glass, but then they're coated with a like a rubber outside so that they don't break. Um, but it's nice to get away from the plastics if you can. And then I will say, the one time to really put some limits on things is right before meals. And that is because we really want to be encouraging the kiddos and the adults to be eating the nutritious things that are being made at the meal, because you're really thinking about, the balance of that, and you put in effort. Usually there's more, vegetables, produce, protein at meals. And so the snacking right close to mealtime, if you can limit that, that can be helpful for encouraging, intake at the meal itself. And sometimes we're just a little bit thirsty. So that could be a nice time to encourage hydration instead of snacking right before the meal, especially for kiddos with little tummies. We want them, eating their meals. Okay, let me check the chat here. Nancy says, I dehydrate kale, spinach, and zucchini and then grind into a coarse powder and add that to soups and sauces for her picky eater. Amazing. I love that. Kale, spinach, zucchini. Yeah, that's a great combo. And then Lori says, way back in class 6, you mentioned substituting a sweet brown rice for white rice. What kind do you buy? Yeah, so it's literally called sweet brown rice, like on the package. That's the name of it. It's a shorter grain. it's a little more sticky. It has a little more amylopectin, so it acts more like sticky white rice, and it looks more like white rice, but it is a whole grain. It's got all the parts, including the fiber, the extra protein, the germ there. And yeah, it's literally called sweet brown rice. Give it a try, see what you think. That's a good swap. And then Linda says, I like to juice fresh lemons, squeeze into ice cube trays, and flavor water with the cubes. Brilliant. Super smart. And then you're not wasting your lemons too. That's awesome. Okay. Step number 12, we're really trying to get away from using food as reward or punishment and identify some non-food rewards, things to be working towards that have nothing to do with, treats. Because we're really trying to maintain a healthy relationship with food and body. And if you feel like you're stuck in that kind of diet mentality, we've talked about this a little bit before, but check out intuitive eating. That might be the next book that you read after you finish this book that we're on. And that can also help you in how to navigate talking about food with, if you've got kiddos or grandkiddos that you're helping to model for. And some of us are still stuck in this, right? Like some of us are still stuck in, oh, I've got to clean my plate to have dessert, like weird, rules like that, where it's like, well, how does this make sense where you're going to eat more in order to then eat more? So, sometimes it's just leftover from our own childhood and things that we need to rewire or rethink a little bit. So if you feel like you're in that situation, you can check out intuitive eating. All right, step number 13, enforce a bedtime for yourself and your family. And we do know that consistent sleep supports overall health, but especially better decision making with regard to food, because we tend to have more of cravings for things like salt, fat, and sugar. We want more of those processed foods when we're not sleeping well. And also just more, like we tend to take in more calories overall as well. This good sleep hygiene, it includes limiting screen time. So this can be kind of tricky, right? Because we've got screens everywhere these days, not just the TV, laptops, tablets, phones, and all that light going into our eyes and then triggering our pineal gland to, keep us alert. If you can set your night mode on your phone or your tablets, that would be really helpful. Like for the time that you want to be starting to wind down, about an hour before you want to be sleeping. Ideally, all of those would be set to night mode. So it basically flips, instead of like a bright white background, you have a black background with a little bit of white text on there instead of the opposite. And for some of my patients, actually, this has been really helpful. And it's a good reminder because they might be like, scrolling on their phone and all of a sudden it changes to night mode and they're like, oh, that's right. I've got to get to bed, we can get kind of sucked into the scrolling. And then definitely address any sleep disturbances because it is really foundational to the rest of health. Okay, step number 14, be patient with yourself, be patient with others. Change really takes time. And we really want to be focusing on progress, not perfection. So many of my patients, when they come to see me, they've been in this perfection mindset. And then when you're in that mindset, you end up throwing in the towel because if it's not perfect, then, why bother? So, progress, not perfection. This is a journey. And you're going to make one little change, hopefully at a time that's realistic so that it actually sticks around, right? So it's a sustainable new lifestyle habit. Okay, let me check the chat here. Lorraine says, unfortunately, I have been studying carbs and it seems I need to give up my love for rice and pasta, noodles. Am I wrong? Okay, Lorraine, you need to go back to previous classes to get the answer to that question. Nobody should be telling you that you absolutely have to give up rice and noodles. It's a matter of how much, when, what is it paired with, what else do you have there, like protein and veggies. So yeah, if you can go back and look at some of those previous classes, specifically on dietary intake, that would be helpful. And then another comment, I turn my phone off every night. Yeah, completely off. Fantastic. I know everyone can't do this for various reasons, but I think it's important to give it a rest. Yeah, if you can, it's lovely. Or sometimes I just I put mine in a different room and plug it in somewhere else where it's not by my bed. That's really nice just to have a break. Okay. All right, so that was the last chapter, chapter 13. And again, if you haven't finished, finish out reading the book because there are some little nuggets left there that we'll cover next month. But let's get into holiday strategies. So we've got 20 minutes to get through some of these because it's November, Thanksgiving's coming up. Depending on which holidays you celebrate, there tends to be a lot of them in the next 2 months here. So I just want to give you some, strategies and thinking ahead with how to be a little bit more thoughtful going into the holidays. So being intentional with your choices, try not to completely avoid your holiday favorites. Usually that backfires. If you're over restricting or if you're feeling deprived, usually that results in, it not being sustainable. So you do want to savor your favorite things in the amounts that still support your big picture goals. Usually, what we find is after the first 3 bites, people have less satisfaction. Like you just want that taste of the thing. So sometimes it's more helpful to just put it in than to just, be saying completely no. Of course, you've got to listen to, what works for you. And then I would focus on the holiday foods that are really meaningful to you. Don't feel pressured to eat stuff that you don't want. I know a lot of people are baking and making cookies and doing a lot of extra things, which is lovely, but also don't feel like you need to eat those things just because they made the effort. If it's not what you want or it's really not supporting your health goals, it's okay to either let them know that if it seems appropriate, or you don't have to say anything. Take it to work and pass it around or something. um, yeah. So just be really intentional about what you're wanting to have. This time of year is really busy. And so sometimes I find that slowing down and removing distractions around the meal can be really helpful. So, make it almost like it is a special occasion, even on a normal weeknight. Slow down, light some candles, turn on the music. Maybe you get out some linen napkins or your fancy dishes. Try and create that atmosphere of less pressure, um, and less rushing, and focus on the people and the meal instead of screens. So get away from the TV, put the phones away somewhere so you're actually having a conversation. It's amazing what a slow 20-minute dinner can do for reconnecting. Also, we know that when we are distracted and busy, we're not really savoring our food as well, but also like our response to how we're digesting that food is a little bit different. And so we want to go into the meal as calm as we can, which is where that deep breathing comes in. We've talked about diaphragmatic breathing before, like the 2 minutes of belly breathing to get you out of fight or flight and into the parasympathetic side of your nervous system, or what we call rest and digest. And that can help with digestion and getting in tune with those hunger and fullness cues. Okay. Get creative with your own traditions, and if you're baking, or if you are cooking certain side dishes, can your traditional recipes use an update potentially? And you could think about it in the sense of both, what could be changed as far as reduced, like maybe the sugar could be reduced a little bit, but also what's missing, like maybe you add some nutritious things to it. Like with my baking, a lot of times I'm using whole wheat pastry flour. I really don't even buy all-purpose flour anymore, because the whole wheat pastry flour does a good job. You could add in some things like the rolled oats, or especially in items like quick breads or cookies, things like ground flax, nuts, dried fruit, Some other holiday fun things like candied ginger. Yeah, those are, the things that come to mind for me, but maybe you guys have some more ideas. And then try using herbs, vinegars, citrus, other spices to elevate dishes, especially if you're trying to reduce the sodium, because a lot of those flavorings can really help you enjoy the food with less salt. Okay. All right, let's keep going. So, more holiday strategies. So, stay hydrated. It is harder in the colder months. A lot of times we don't get the same kind of thirst cues. So, maybe swap to some warm items. Like I've got my tea here that I'm sipping on. Um, do think about the caffeine. Ideally, it would be, herbal or low caffeine in the evening hours. Even things like warm milk can be really nice. I'll put a tablespoon of molasses in there if I want a little sweet thing. It's almost like a coffee, but without the caffeine at night. So a little, bit of molasses and milk or soy milk warmed up is a lovely, lovely evening drink. Sparkling waters and flavorings like natural flavorings such as lemon, mint, whole fruit. You can do like a splash of juice instead of it being straight juice. This time of year, I really enjoy the pomegranate arils. You can buy them already out of the fruit, where you don't have to buy the whole fruit, although the whole fruit is fun, but you can buy just the arils in the cold refrigerated section by the salads these days in the grocery store. And do rethink your drink, especially if it is a cocktail or like a holiday alcoholic drink. I will say they are very, very calorie dense and oftentimes very high in sugar as well. And, a lot of times we're just going for the festiveness of it. So you can make mocktails, put them in a fancy glass, add, like here, there's this little garnish of apple slices or mint or a lemon wedge or whatever it is. And you'll get by with a lot less calories, a lot less sugar, and not the alcohol either, which is kind of a nice thing. I don't know if you guys have come across these True Orange, True Lime, True Lemon in the grocery store, but they're our go-tos. We have them. We've got a little like bar area in our dining room, um, and they just live there because they're amazing to add to any sort of like mocktail or just sparkling water or to tea. It's basically just the fruit that has been dehydrated and pulverized, and they're in little packets. So you're just adding lime or you're just adding orange to something, and it really brings out a lot of flavor. And for my patients who have like kidney stones, it's a nice addition to help prevent kidney stones. Or for people who are trying to lower their sodium intake, those citrus flavors bring out a lot of taste on our taste buds. So you need less salt. So it's a nice addition. But yeah, stay hydrated. And then have a food plan. So especially for, buffets or like holiday meals or potlucks or gatherings of some sort, ideally you would bring something, bring a dish that supports your own dietary needs. And think about what is all there. Like do a little walk around. If it's a buffet, check it all out. Or if it's like in multiple places around uh, the house or the venue, do a little perusing before you build your plate, because a lot of times we just start filling the plate with whatever is at the beginning of wherever we start, and then we get to the end and realize, oh, but my favorite thing is here at the end. And we're going to have that for sure anyway, right? So build your plate in your mind, like think about what you really want to have. And if you are the one setting up the buffet, ideally you would set it up where the vegetables are first, because a lot of times the vegetables get put last. But remember, we're trying to fill half of our plate with vegetables. So ideally the vegetables would be first, and then they're going to go faster and people are going to eat more of them. Then the protein, then the starchy sides. especially for blood sugar control, right? Because remember, we're going for like that quarter plate starch, quarter plate protein, and half as our non-starchy veggies. And then if you're thinking about a meal like Thanksgiving, where oftentimes there is a dessert, like there's pumpkin pie or pecan pie or something going on, dessert wise. If you can allow both space for your blood sugar to go up and come back down, and if you can do a little bit of movement in that time frame, that can be really helpful for not having so much of a spike in your blood sugar, but also for enjoying the dessert more. Because a lot of times we get to the end of this very filling meal with lots of options, and the dessert is almost like we can't even enjoy it because we're so full. So if you can take a break, do a walk, do something that is active, bring your blood sugar back down, digest a little bit, and then actually really enjoy the dessert as like the next snack. That can be a nice strategy for managing all of those carbohydrates, all those sugars. And don't skip or, try to save up for the meal because usually that does backfire in overeating. Just stick with your normal meal snack schedule. It's gonna be okay. Um, and then if you are someone who really, really likes like Thanksgiving dinner, for example, and you really want to try everything, I would actually plan for leftovers. Plan your plate so you can enjoy that plate, but don't feel like you've got to get it all in one meal or that you've got to like have it all at one time, right? You can space it out and enjoy it for leftovers maybe over a couple days so you're not in that deprivation mindset, but more in a mindset of just enjoyment, but it's still supporting your health goals. Alrighty, if you guys have any more holiday strategies, go ahead and put those in the chat, especially for food. Um, moving your body and really prioritizing movement around this time of year can be helpful for managing your stress as well. Get out there, take some walks, go see the lights. If you've got a companion like a dog, that can be really helpful. Maybe if it's, poor weather, have an indoor game night where you're being active with friends, or start an active holiday tradition. We don't get the snow here in the Pacific Northwest, like we did in Minnesota where I'm from, but and a lot of times it's rainy. But you could do something indoors, or you could, walk the mall or something with friends. That's actually really festive at this time of year. It's all done up in decorations. That can be kind of a nice indoor activity, but something to get you moving. Okay. Let me look at the chat. Rain saying, yeah, okay. Eating, watching TV, got it. Yeah, that's very typical. And you're going to go back to the earlier classes and catch up. Yeah, that's great. And Dan says he's been catching up via YouTube channel. Good job, Dan. Yeah, we're happy to record these. I'm glad that that's helpful for you. And you can watch it at like 1.25 and make me talk even faster. Get through them a little quicker. Okay. Managing stress. Sometimes it's really helpful to take a beat and think about where this is coming from, like finding the true source of your stress, because sometimes it's actually stress we're putting on ourselves that we really don't need to be. Or if it's someone else, like, maybe we need to address that more appropriately, like directly, right? And be aware of using food as a coping mechanism because a lot of times we do that. It does make us feel better, but sometimes that is actually a masking situation where then we're really not addressing the issue. And so, yeah, be aware if that's happening. There's lots of non-food ways to de-stress. Thinking about getting into that parasympathetic side of your nervous system, meditation, prayer, belly breathing, all of those things can help with that, where it literally down regulates your stress hormones. journaling or mind mapping, especially if you've got a lot on your mind, it can be helpful to write it down or to organize it. Or if you're a list person and you're feeling overwhelmed, getting your list made so it stays put, and then in your mind you can let some of that go because it's written down. Or if you need if you need to connect, like calling a friend or a loved one, if you're at a computer all day like I am sometimes, taking stretch breaks, getting outdoors, even like, a couple of yoga poses or something can be helpful in between tasks for lowering stress. So yeah, do stay on top of it, especially this time of year. And then we want to be present and practice gratitude, right? The holidays are here once a year. Try and stay in the moment. Cherish what really matters to you. Usually that comes down to people. Um, and remember that one day or one week even is not going to throw you off track with your big picture health goals. So really don't stress about like the Thanksgiving dinner or the holiday get together, because it's one time. It's not your everyday, and it's your day-to-day changes that you're making that really start adding up towards your big picture health goals over time. Recognize the efforts of those around you and your own efforts this time of year, and try and practice gratitude towards your friends and family in whatever way possible, right? Okay, so your homework is write down a few strategies to implement. Probably one or two of those things we just covered stand out to you for getting through the holidays, things you maybe need to work on. Consider your recipes. What do you want to do with them? Do you want to make any tweaks, or do you want to just say, I like it as is, and I'm just going to watch my portions and just savor it? And then really focus on being thankful and enjoying the social time together. You're going to finish up reading the last bit of the book for our class in December, and then we'll cover those problem solving strategies and some alternative things for blood sugar control as well. And I will put some recipes together in an email to Christina and then send that off to her so that you guys will get those before your holiday here. And yeah, I wish you really good holidays. Let me just check the chat one last time. You're so welcome. Yeah. Um, So the book, yes, the book that we are covering, we've been covering this, going through the chapters in the Preventing Diabetes book by Jill Weisenberger. And when you go back and look at the previous recordings, you'll see that. And it is edition number 2. So it's her second edition that's out of the book. And basically, we've been pretty much following the book all the way through chapter 1 through now we're at the end through 13. You don't need the book to, take in these strategies, but if you have the book, I will say it's kind of nice to read it on your own and then, have it be in a presentation form like this, where we kind of talk about strategies and maybe a little bit more information beyond what the book has to say. But yeah, you don't need the book necessarily, but it is really helpful. And that's what most of this information has been based off of. All righty. Well, have a fantastic month, everyone. I will see you in December, and happy holidays. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for you being here and for making changes, because your changes actually really have a ripple effect on other people and on our community. So thank you, and I'll see you in December.